Well, the ballots have been cast for the NHL awards, and it seems like the two categories that have the most intrigue right now would have to be the one for the Hart and for the Calder. And for this argument or discussion, we bring in Eric Francis and Satyr Shah. And Eric, I will start with you. I think everybody's in agreement that the top two are Quinn Hughes and Cale Makar. And on almost any kind of polls I've seen, Makar has been winning. Is that the right choice?
I think it is, and you're right. With all due respect to Quinn Hughes, and as we delve into this, I don't want to make any disparaging comments about Hughes as I compare him to Cale Makar. But Cale Makar, to me, we can delve into all the numbers as well, but just the eye test. When you see Cale Makar skate, the way he plays, the way he dominates play, it's just so obvious to me that he is the class of the Calder League at this point right now.
Well, he is in points per game anyway. Of course, he played fewer games than Quinn Hughes. Eric, we saw Makar when he played his first NHL game in the playoffs last spring. Of course, 5 games last year for Quinn Hughes as well. And Sat, the eye test, Quinn Hughes certainly passes that as well.
Well, I don't think any player in the league skates the way Quinn Hughes does. I mean, Connor McDavid is faster. There are players who are better in a straight line, but nobody skates on their edges and dances around the ice the way Quinn Hughes does. Now, playing hockey isn't a ice dancing competition, so that's not going to be giving him the edge in the Calder vote. But we start looking at how close he is to Cale Makar, and considering the fact that Quinn is a little bit younger, he came up a bit later, and the degree of difficulty on Vancouver's team, where you have to be the savior on the back end compared to where Makar is in Colorado, and it's very close. They're essentially down the middle, so you can come up with some little things to give one guy the edge over the other. I'll give Quinn Hughes the edge because of the degree of difficulty he was playing with. And you look at the quality of teammates that Quinn Hughes played with defensively compared to Cale Makar in Colorado, it's pretty impressive to see how Quinn Hughes was by far the best defenseman on this team, and he elevated every single player he played with. So for me, it's Quinn Hughes, but it's a razor-thin margin.
Eric, do you factor in quality of teammates into this discussion?
Well, I think it's such a fascinating point because, obviously the Colorado Avalanche are a much better team than Vancouver going into the season and throughout the season. And Quinn Hughes had a huge role in Vancouver becoming a playoff team against a lot of odds. But you can't hold that against Cale Makar, and I'll tell you why. Cale Makar was so brilliant stepping into the playoffs last season, scoring 48 hours after he was called up from UMass, that he allowed the Colorado Avalanche to go and trade Tyson Barrie in the offseason and acquire one of the best second-line centers in the National Hockey League in Nazem Kadri. And that's what took Colorado to just another level to be one of the best teams in the National Hockey League. So instead of holding it against Cale Makar, you got to say, hey, Cale Makar is a big reason why the Colorado Avalanche are one of the classes of the league because he allowed that trade to happen. Tyson Barrie ran that power play for many years in Colorado and was brilliant at it. Not so brilliant when he got to Toronto, but when he was in Colorado, he ran it masterfully. And Cale Makar made him replaceable overnight. And so I think that's a huge feather in the cap of Cale Makar, and it's not a knock. You can't knock Makar for being on such a good team. He took them to a new level as well.
Makar is obviously a bigger guy, so people like the way he can clear the front of the net better than Quinn Hughes. But the metrics, Sat, do they not say that Quinn Hughes was actually a better defender this year than Cale Makar?
And that's the real impressive thing about Quinn Hughes, because you look at him in his stature, and it's easy to assume that he would have trouble in his own end. And we go back to that first game where Connor McDavid burned him coming through, and we know Leon Draisaitl one play essentially trucked him over. But then throughout that game, you saw Quinn Hughes start making adjustments. Instead of trying to put his body in front of big players, he used his stick, his positioning, and he's so adept with his skating and how to get body leverage and how good he is with his stick that defensively Quinn Hughes was actually well above average. And to that point about quality of teammates, we'll get to the Hart Trophy conversation a bit, and I don't think it's a knock on players. It's more to look at two guys who are so similar in their production and their play, and the degree of difficulty just gives the edge to Quinn Hughes in this regard. And if you look at his defensive play, like you mentioned, Murph, I think people assume he's not good defensively, but his defensive game was solid. And if you look at the Canucks blue line, they did not have another defenseman who was actually playing at an average level based on their salary and the role they played in. So Quinn Hughes was essentially the only legitimate top four defenseman this team had this season, and he elevated everybody around them And he actually was perhaps their best defensive defenseman, which is saying quite a bit considering he's a rookie.
Well, guys, I'll leave it at this. I think we can all agree on the fact that I think we'll be debating these two for years to come. Eric?
Yeah. Oh, I totally agree. And, they're going to lead their franchises for a long, long time. And, the fact that Quinn Hughes accelerated that, reinvigoration, as we may call it in Vancouver, it just speaks so volumes of the kind of player he is, and they can build around him for sure. Same goes for Cale Makar. You're right. We'll be watching both these guys for many years. When I saw Cale Makar start in the playoffs and just jump right in against the Flames last year and not skip a beat and be one of the better players in the series, the talk around the entire series was he's going to win not just one Norris Trophy, but he's going to win a bunch. Let's start with the Calder first, and then after that, there's a good chance that both these guys could be vying for the Norris for a lot of years.
Final question to you, Sat. Usually there's recency bias, but are we to assume that perhaps Makar's first 4-6 weeks of the season is what might propel him to this award?
I think it plays a part into it, but let's be, completely fair to Cale Makar and how he's played. He is so dynamic. And like Eric Francis mentioned, him winning the Calder Trophy, I don't think should be coming as any slight to Quinn Hughes and Canucks fans. You're talking about two guys. We're splitting peas trying to figure out which guy is better than the other guy, and when we're giving an edge to that guy. And Cale Makar also scores a lot more goals, and he's so explosive with how he skates. One of the things about Quinn Hughes that's so exciting when you watch him, the subtleties to his game. Even if you're not paying attention, you'll think he didn't do anything. Just watch him, how he skates the puck out, how he turns around, how he makes up ground on players. There's so many amazing subtle things about the way Quinn Hughes plays that those who watch him every day in Vancouver appreciate it, whereas Cale Makar has an explosiveness to it, and it really pops in the highlights. But we're talking about two of the greatest defensemen to come into the league in recent history, and considering there's another guy by the name of Miro Heiskanen and Rasmus Dahlin, we might be entering the golden age of young defensemen in the National Hockey League.
Well, I know you guys say we're splitting hairs, but I expect one of you to give the other a giant apology when we see who actually wins this thing, all right?
You got it.
Thanks for joining me, fellas.
Thank you.
Awesome.